the first episode of Practical Magic, an exploration into the craft, the work behind what we perceive to be kind of the magical modalities that our healers practice. Our first practitioner is Mo Abdelbaki. Did I say that right?
Close. It's fine. Abdelbaki.
I'm sorry, Abdelbaki.
No.
Mo is on a lifelong quest into all things metaphysical, and this has provided him with a powerful intuition and accurate tools with which he has helped thousands of people worldwide. He's a universally acknowledged tarot expert and has an expertise in other modalities. What are the other modalities?
You're much too kind. I work with, well, I study it all the time because I love it, but the I Ching and Vedic astrology, which is different than Western, but apples and oranges.
Mm-hmm.
So runes, I love the runes. They're really quite fascinating.
Those are the stone or coin looking...
Yes, they're actually images. They're. I have one of my cards kind of dedicated to that. It's about knowledge being passed on, and they're the Norse version of our alphabet. So that's all they are, is our alphabet. But they are, for some reason, really remarkable.
And then we've imbued them with these magical qualities, this meaning.
They actually had them from the beginning.
Really?
Yes, and that's fascinating to me.
That is.
Yeah.
So you told me over the phone in one of our pre-interviews that you are really good at what you do. You're good at your job because you're obsessive.
I am obsessive, yeah.
And ethical.
Yes, indeed. I do believe that ethics is important.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe that we are living in a culture devoid of them, for the most part. My father was a remarkable man and a completely and totally ethical man. And you can't help but learn when you're around that. And it didn't always serve him, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's easier to live life when you have rules. And when you have rules of engagement that don't include ripping people off, or unfortunately you can't tell people what they want to hear if it's not true. I just have such a belief that we can always benefit from the truth, even if it's not pleasant.
Right.
You know.
So how would you describe your work? What gives you the impetus to do what you do? You do work that is in the etheric realm that's out there for a lot of us, you know, who live in what we think of as reality with our New York Times and the CNN and, you know, mathematics and science.
Well, I read the New York Times and I watch MSNBC.
Right, okay.
But I do all that, but there is this other place where, and it's not, when you start out, it's very la-la. You know, it's like, oh my, you know. But after a while, you get to realize it's just natural. That there is no difference between that world and this world. And it's not a religion. And that always irritates me when people try to put religious overtones on it. It truly upsets me because it's not.
So what is your work then?
I basically supplement my obsession with studying and learning by doing readings for people, by helping them, guiding them along in their lives. And the only reason I know I'm probably good at what I do is because I'm still doing it and live indoors, you know, and am ethical at what I do. So, and it's easy to say that, but it is true.
What made you want to do this work?
I didn't. I wanted to study it. You know, like all kids, the first thing I want to do is be a baseball player, and then, you know, then a fireman. And then you get over that the first time you see a fireman coming out of a building. You go, no. But I knew I didn't want to do a lot of things. What I did want to do was learn about these weird things in the world.
What was the first thing that sparked your interest?
I think it actually was tarot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I lived in a house when I was in that same time with the tarot deck. I lived in a house that was haunted. And so I spent about 2 years in absolute terror all the time because there was a malicious entity there. But I saw a guy in a basement where there was no guy, you know.
What did he look like?
Well, he was real. Should I tell the story?
Yeah, because
Okay.
that's my other question. Do you
Okay.
believe in spirits, ghosts, and other entities?
I do.
I'm going to guess yes.
I do.
Okay.
I don't know what they are. I don't know what they, why they're there. But, okay, so here's the story. My mom and dad came to this country from Egypt. Okay? And I was born in the UK, and on their way over here, it's not like they stopped off to have me, but my dad went to school there for a while, and then they came here. And we moved to Fort Collins, not far from here. And lived in an old house that was at least 100 years old in the 60s when I lived there. And we're close to it. And my mom loved the old world way, so she, for Easter one year, bought chicks, baby chicks, right? They weren't but she said they were for me, ostensibly, but they were actually, because she wanted to raise them and then probably slaughter them and eat them. I mean, that was my mom, And so it was my job at the age of 6 to go downstairs into the basement and feed them, right? And I hated the basement. It was one of those old basements that was just dirt.
Right.
And it had the big octopus boilers down there, the heating system, and it had one light. So you had to open the door to the basement, which was off the kitchen, go down these stairs that you knew there was a hand gonna come out.
And it creaked.
Oh yeah, I remember it as wobbling, but it didn't, And you get to the bottom and you had to go into the room and feel for the light thing. And it was pretty long because I was young. And then you turn on the light. And there were the chickens, and they had this coffee can with a light in it, so there was a little bit of light. But I went in, and I had to go do it one day, went down, and just felt terrible. Cold and apprehension. I was apprehensive, and I turned on the light, and there was a guy standing next to a chair. And I thought he was a barber. He was wearing a white shirt with the buttons up the side. And he had the chair, and he
No,
get
really.
in the chair.
Oh.
And of course I flipped out, screaming,
Yeah.
and whoop, up the stairs, and man in the basement, call the police. My dad goes running down, no man in the basement. So they called off the police and take me to the doctor, where the doctor said, your son has a very active imagination. And which I probably do, but so here's the kicker. That was one.
Right.
There were two more, but one really, really hated little boys, of which I was one, and she was the mother-in-law of this man. I'll tell you how I know that in just a minute. But and she had died in a room there, and my room was not too far away. But and about that time, I talked my mom into taking me to see a movie called 13 Ghosts. Yeah, stupid move, because it was new. It was William Castle. It was, they had subsonics in it, so it would terrify you. And I didn't need any urging on that. But my dad got permission from the people who were renting this home to get into the garage, to store some stuff. So it was an old carriage house, literally a carriage house, even though, they'd had a car, I'm sure, by the time they died. Went in, and I just got a chill, because there was the chair that I had seen in the basement. And the place was filled with filing cabinets, stuff like that, filled with human teeth. This guy had been a dentist.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And there were pictures, and I said to my dad, I said, that's the guy. And he looked at the picture and he said, was he this young? And I said, it was the man and his wife, married, early in the century. And I said, no, he was old. He had a mustache and a gold tooth. And then we found another picture, mustache, old tooth, gold tooth, probably very old. And he said, let's get out of here. So we left.
Did you feel that
terror,
malignant energy?
No, he was not malignant. I actually believe he had no idea. I think he was just there, and I don't
didn't
know
know
why
he was
there.
dead.
I don't think so, and I also don't think he believed. I'm not even sure he saw me. Oh, I just hit my microphone. Isn't that funny? You always do that.
That's okay.
But I don't think he had any ill intent. But he did scare me, in fact. And so also found other pictures and stuff like that. And we were in there for a while, and it was one of these old drills with the, have you ever seen them with the pulley? And the, it was just, and teeth, lots and lots of teeth, And I thought, this guy kept every tooth he pulled.
Wow.
And so he said, we're leaving this. We're not going to store anything here, and we're also not going to tell your mother. Which we didn't do. There was a lot we didn't tell my mother, like when I went streaking.
When you have, do you think that you have an extra special ability to see things, and did you inherit that? If you do,
well, it's on both sides. My mother was annoyingly psychic, which was terrible for me when I was in my adolescence.
Right.
Oh, it was terrible. You have no idea. And my dad's mom had it as well. She was actually kind of a healer, an herbalist. She would, do these things and do passes over you, and was really kind of amazing. The things she did.
So you combine your expertise, your obsessiveness, and do the tarot, throw the I Ching. But you mostly do that for your own.
I Ching is mainly for me.
Right.
Yeah, because I love it. And the runes, or I'll pull a rune sometimes. I knew a great guy here in town. His name was Ice Wolf. He's gone now, but he was a runic master, and he was such a cool guy. Always wore big furs, And it was before Thor's hammer became popular. He always had one around his neck. But we would talk about such things, and realized that runes became very popular in the '80s with Ralph Bloom, who was a guy who did okay with the meaning, but he didn't really do it justice. The runes are magnificent. They're lovely, and they're so incredibly right.
Really?
Yeah.
For example,
you can ask a very simple question or a very difficult question, and you can pull a rune, and if you just think about what it represents. For example, the first rune is called Fehu, and it looks kind of like it's a line with two lines going off to the side. And it represents movable wealth, essentially. And you think, why? Well, because it's cattle. And at the time, cattle were, your herd, and you had your movable wealth, and you could be a nomad, and you could do this and that. I mean, we have this image of the Norse and the Vikings, the Teutonic tribes, as all being warriors, but they weren't. They actually had, they were. They definitely were, but they did more than that.
Right.
They had their own. So there was Valhalla for those who liked getting up and fighting and cutting each other to ribbons every day, and then there was Volksgang, I think it was what it was called. I might have that not quite right, but that was the heaven for those of us who aren't warriors. So and you would end up farming and stuff, and so both are incorporated into the runes.
So if you pulled that or turned it or whatever, however, I've never used a rune, and you got that movable wealth, what would that mean to you?
It depends upon the context, of course, but generally speaking, it is a good thing to have. You want to have, because it's also stability, and it's also a sense of comfort in life. You've got these cattle. Now the next one is called Urusaz, and it looks like a big U, sort of, but with an angle, and that is that's a big, gigantic aurochs. The prehistoric, not prehistoric, but they went extinct in the 1600s in a Polish forest somewhere. But they were big bulls. Right. And they're completely gone now. And so if you think about what is the aurochs to the first one, to the herd of cattle, these aurochs would come in, they would break through the pens, and they would steal the cows, for their harem. And so you realize that it's very powerful, but it can also indicate getting ripped off.
Right.
So you work with these, and of course this comes over the years, and you kind of realize more and more and more how full they are, and they're just, I really do love them.
So for you, I would say, if I pulled a rune, is that the proper term?
That is.
If I pulled a rune, movable wealth, I might think, that's great, given my situation, I have a business, etc., etc. But I definitely will bring to it your insight, your years of experience, your obsessive quest for knowledge, and I suspect your psychic ability.
That's the thing. Let me tell you a very quick story. I don't know if I should.
Oh, then you have to.
Yeah.
You call her in.
I was speaking to someone about a situation they had. And all I will say is that while I was talking to this person, I smelled fingernail polish. Okay? Now I don't use it, but I smelled it very clearly. And I said, and that's the part I can't explain. That I don't know. And I said, I just smelled fingernail polish. And it turned out that was the crux of a problem in, I can't say what it is, but it's a problem. It was actually the focal point, and this person hadn't said anything. And so I don't consider, oh, look at me, I got to do this. I consider that I needed to know that to get that person, to just open up more about it and talk about the situation. And that's what happened.
Would that, do you have to get into a flow?
No.
You're there all the time.
Yeah, well, you get to be a grumpy old man, you don't want to get into anything. You're either there. To me, you see, for me, it's nothing special. I don't think it is for any of us. I think we all have it. It's just that, anyone with reasonable intelligence and drive can learn to do neurosurgery. The question is, do you want to? I don't. My dad was a surgeon. Not for me,
Would you say that your work is separate from you? Are you your work?
That's a really good question.
Thanks.
I try. I try to bring in some sort of separation, because I have what's been called my dead or alive reflex, which is someone on the news missing, dead or alive, and people ask me, and it's you just know. I don't like that.
Right.
I don't want that. If I can be that bold, because sometimes not only do you know, but you know more than you want to know. And and that I see, and I don't go there. I don't, I never thought I would read for people. That was never my intent. That was never what I thought would happen.
Your thing was to be a scholar.
I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
I was just fascinated, absolutely fascinated with the information itself. I used to hang out in the Fort Collins Public Library, and they had a big occult section, very big. I didn't realize that Fort Collins back in the 20s had a huge spiritualist movement, just gigantic. And actually, when I was in the second grade, I was reading palms on the playground, and I was there was this very cute girl, and I was reading her palm only to hold her hand, and suddenly I felt this immense pain in my ear, and it was a teacher, and she was old-fashioned, and she had those long fingernails, and she had them right at my ear, and she dragged me into the principal's office, sat me down, and said he was reading palms. Now, I always assumed that it was because she was very conservative, and thought it was a sin. Turns out she was a huge part of that spiritualist movement. So.
And she didn't want you to be cavalier about it?
I think that was probably it.
It wasn't just
or to play with stuff, yeah.
Like a parlor trick. It's serious stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, To leave the work questions for a moment and go into philosophical, you feel good about that?
Oh, I feel good about everything.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Does evil exist?
No, we are evil.
Well, then it exists if we're evil,
We,
right?
we create it, we make it up.
Right. So there
Um,
is no entity,
I believe not, no.
force,
Because there is no evil in nature.
but are we part of nature?
Oh, absolutely, and that's why what we consider to be evil is not considered to be evil by others. Yeah. So, for example, I'm not a vegetarian. I eat meat, and yet I've known people who thought I was the biggest SOB in the world for eating meat, and they were Hindus often, or just judgmental for another. I had a friend in high school and in college who said, "Don't eat that beast. You'd be with him eating it. Don't eat the beast." You know, that's
Right.
And he considered the slaughter and the preparation of other animals for ingestion to be evil.
So you think evil is a matter of perspective?
It is a matter of perspective and culture.
You don't think, say, let me just pull something out of a hat.
Okay?
Trump is evil, or Putin, or
Trump is an idiot, and he's a megalomaniac, and he's also from a very wealthy and very specific point of view. I lived in the Deep South for a few years,
right.
and I met good, wonderful people who were die-hard racists. Now, how can you balance that out, right? It was hard for me.
Right.
I mean, how do you have a friend that you would rely on with your life, but at the same time, he uses, epithets that are just disgusting.
Well, what about evil dudes? Evil dudes.
That's an evil dude.
You have a story which I'll get to in a moment, which dovetails with this question. But if if people do evil, because it is empirically evil, torture someone or deliberately be cruel. That's not eating a steak. That's
Yeah.
I'm talking serious cruelty.
Yeah.
Based on nothing other than being cruel. Would you consider that an evil
No, I would
person, a
consider
force,
that
an energy?
an aberration.
Uh-huh.
For example, let's talk about Ted Bundy.
Right.
Ted Bundy was a product, I believe, probably of some sort of physiological business as well, but he was also raised in a very, we would have to call it abusive household. So were many of the people who went on to do those things. Ed Kemperer, one of the most famous of all serial killers, and really, really crazy, I think. I mean, I don't even know what that word means, because I've been called that.
Right.
And hopefully with some right, but that's okay. And he had a very abusive and very harsh childhood. So these people are created, and any one of us, I think, under the right circumstances could be. And now we have this thing called, sociopathy, right?
Right.
And they say there is no such thing as a psychopath, just degrees of sociopathy. But there are people who are born without a conscience and without social ability. Now, does that mean that they're evil? I don't think so. I think that there is something, because to say that they're evil would have to mean that they have been influenced by some Luciferian satanic entity.
Does that exist?
No. I've known Satanists.
Right. They're good people. They're friends of mine.
Yeah, they're very good people. What are they? They're hedonists.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They say, this is it. This is the ride. Enjoy it. I met Satanists right out of high school in California. They wanted me to join. I was like, I don't join so well,
Right.
and I'm not, they had one guy who cut off some fingers as sacrifices, and it was like, no. I was fascinated with ancient Egyptian mythology and ancient Egyptian magic. And I had planned on being an Egyptologist, but then I met some Egyptologists and thought, no, because they didn't like what I wanted to do, which was the magic.
Does magic exist?
Yes, yeah, it's natural.
It's natural.
It's just as natural as riding a bike.
What's magical? What's magic?
It's the acceleration or the slowing down of something that would happen otherwise, or that couldn't happen. That could happen. That slowing down is that would happen anyway. So, for example, you cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, but you can make a sow's ear purse, right?
Right.
So that's all magic is. You can't create something that you couldn't do otherwise. And you should never try to create something that wouldn't be easier to create in the real world. Those are the rules. Now, there are things that can be influenced, but there's always, as Newton said, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
And that includes that world because it's part of nature.
You mean the unseen world, the non-ordinary world.
Right. The stuff we haven't figured out yet. And
Right.
that's all it is. It's the stuff that you and I haven't figured out.
So you don't want to play in that world, because there will be, if I were to say summon, I don't know, an entity that would create an action or reaction in the real world, in the ordinary seen world.
Anything we do
Right.
causes something to happen. I always advise people, don't mess with demons,
Right.
we call them. In fact, they are simply forces of nature. And we can anthropomorphize them, which is really what, Venus was and Aphrodite, the same thing.
Right.
Osiris and Isis and Sekhmet and, all of that. It's easy to do. And when we anthropomorphize these forces of nature, we think we can control them. You can't control them. There's no controlling nature. It is what it is, including our own evolution or devolution, as we were
Right.
discussing. It's getting a handle on something and saying, I can make this happen.
Do you believe that there are places in the world that are energy vortices, vortexes,
Oh, sure, sure.
vectors?
Absolutely.
Where?
I went all over the world. And in places you wouldn't naturally expect.
And do you feel in these places that you can manifest more? That
I don't know. See, that's a good question. I'd have to try it out.
like if you were to, or even read people better, if we were to be on a mountaintop, I feel that Aspen might be one, right? If I were there with you in Aspen, let's go. Would you?
I'd be living in my car.
Right.
If I was in Aspen.
That's true too.
No, let me answer that.
Okay.
What I do, hopefully, is the revelation of some truth that is relevant to the person in the moment. Okay? I used to do a thing with my cards in my, not my cards, but
Right.
in my tarot class, which is I would lay out 10 cards and read for every person in the class with the same 10 cards.
Huh.
And the point of the exercise was to say, these are pieces of cardboard. It's how you interpret them in the moment to that person in context with what they're looking for. And so
But that requires your level of expertise.
right, and instead of making them say, I can do this, they quit. They said, I'm not even I can never do this. I'd say, oh, then I won't do this anymore, because my point was lost upon them. The point is you have to work at it. So, with that being said, I believe that we are looking for the truth. The only thing I want to do, have I been wrong? Sure, I imagine I have. I also have people call me years later and say, remember when I called you a big jerk? Yes, I do. Well, you were right.